All right, 132 folks, provided my background doesn't go nuclear again, it had a heavy-duty nuclear glow to it a minute ago. We'll go ahead and we'll talk about Unit 2, we'll talk about Chapter 17. I've already been talking about it in the other videos. I've talked about the shift, I've talked about um, the redemption of the South, how the old guard that was there that caused the change, that caused the Confederacy, is now back in power. And it's causing some shift. Among the shift that I didn't talk much about is going to be the cropland system or sharecropping. One of the ways to make the plantations work, one of the ways to make them work without giving up the power, without giving up the land, is to have the former slaves work the land for you. And rather than give them the land or sell them the land, they're going to loan it to them or rent it to them for a share of the crop. And the thing is many of these folks are looking to buy land, looking to create their own opportunity and fend for themselves, and the opportunity to farm, well, they know how to do that with the idea that they're going to eventually win enough money or get enough money to buy land of their own. But the way the system is set up, it is rigged. Listen, if you don't have much, then you need to borrow the tools, you need to borrow the seed, you need to borrow whatever else. And the landowner is going to either sell it to you, rent it to you, or have the company store loan it to you in such a way that you're going to be indebted for even more. Farming in the best of years is hit and miss. And so what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the transition. The transition is going to be one of the landowner is going to have the power, and he's going to be pushing the people who grow, where they're trying to grow a crop to A, support their family, feed their family, and B, to pay for some things. They're going to be pushed more and more to grow cash crops, to grow tobacco, to grow cotton, especially to cotton at this particular point. So they can properly pay the landowner because he doesn't want food. What he wants is something he can sell. And so you're going to see the push towards those cash crops. And really what happens is the sharecrop system doesn't help anybody besides the landowner. It just works people into more and more of a situation where they're more deeply in debt and they can't afford to leave the land, because if you break your sharecrop agreement without paying what you owe, you can be arrested. And very often you're arrested and you're incarcerated. You'll be incarcerated on the land working for the landowner that you were trying to get away from until you can pay off the balance. And you can't ever pay off the balance because that's not the way it works. So I want you to keep it in mind, because the cropland system is a way of controlling people, and not just people of color, but is going to be controlling the poor white folks too, because the idea is you want the people with money, the people with knowledge, the people like you in power. And that power is also going to come up when we start talking about the vote, when we start talking about disenfranchising the people, because it won't be just the black vote that gets disenfranchised, but it's going to be against the poor as well. So you'll start seeing, if you look on Moodle, you'll see that I have posted a copy of the Louisiana literacy test. And Louisiana literacy test about disenfranchising people. It's about testing. Part of the Mississippi plan was obviously disenfranchising the black vote, stripping away the power that was given to the people of color during the Reconstruction, and they're trying to do it by legal means. Whether it is a poll tax, whether it is the grandfather clause. Listen, if your grandfather voted in the last election, then you can vote in this election. Well, how many grandfathers of ex-slaves would have voted in the last election? Not too many. And in addition to that, well, there's many white folks whose grandfathers. And so the idea is about who can vote and who can't vote. And the literacy test is, about one of those things. Now, in the other video, I mentioned, the King James version and being able to qualify, certain verses of that. The literacy test, if you look at it, is a whole different version of things, which I thought was quite interesting. I want to move on from that. I did not mention Ida B. Wells, and she's kind of really hugely important at this particular point, because she is a well-known, well, she is definitely about free speech. but she's definitely a reporter. What she's going to do is she's going to document in this time period lynchings. She's going to document lynchings of several people of color by the white power structure. She's going to write about this. She's going to emphasize free speech in writing, and she's going to be, in some cases, driven out of town. In at least one case, she's going to have her newspaper office burned down. She's going to be ridden out of town on a rail because they want to shut her up. And what you see in her is the beginnings of what becomes the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. You see the workings of what is going to be W.E.B. Du Bois. You're going to see the workings of Booker T. Washington. You're going to see the workings of Ida B. Wells coming together in this movement to try to empower people of color, to try to educate, to try to reinforce and create a unified movement rather than pockets of movement, and that's important. I mentioned Booker T. Washington in the other video as well. I talked about the Tuskegee movement. Usually, I ask students, listen, you want to go to college, right? Oh, yes, I want to go to college. I want to go to school. Well, Booker T. Washington, his very first students at the Tuskegee Institute, part of their first class assignment is help build the school, help build the building, because he's going to exercise practical knowledge, and part of that practical knowledge is going to be in brick and mortar, literally brick and mortar. It's going to be in masonry. It's going to be in carpentry. So do you want your education badly enough to build the building in which you're going to be taught in? And to me, that adds a whole different level of, dedication to knowledge, dedication to learning. And so I believe that's a huge part of where he comes from. When we get to the debate between Booker T. and Du Bois, I'm much more of a Booker T. person than I am a Du Bois person. Now, right now, somebody's going to say, dude, that's because you are so white and so old. Yes, I am so white and I'm so old. But what I know is this: we're a capitalist society. We're about money. And if I teach you a trade, and with that trade you can earn money, and you have money to spend, and you spend your money with the people that agree and support you, it's going to have an economic effect, especially if like-minded people do the same thing as you do. That means it's going to be an economic force. And anytime we see an economic force implemented, anytime you start to affect a capitalist pocketbook, they have a change of heart. And honestly, I got to tell you, with the practical knowledge, the everyday knowledge, the trade skill knowledge that Booker T. Washington wants to teach people to do, they're going to earn a living. That's what my father taught me, is how to earn a living. I earned my living long before I started being a talking head on YouTube or in the classroom, that I have skills. Those skills allowed me to make a living. They allowed me to earn money. They allowed me to exercise my financial prerogative in such a way that it made an impact. That's going to be the discussion that comes up here, the discussion that still has. I think that would, in the long run, be more effective than ceaseless agitation, where agitation is important, and ceaselessly agitating can be important. People will listen sooner if you start to impact their pocketbook. So I'm going to leave it there on this discussion, and I want to talk about a couple of other things, because we start to see the influence in the West, and you're going to see folks of color in the West. You're going to see the exodusters. You're going to see the Buffalo Soldiers. You're going to see black towns that are set up, excuse me, in the West and the Midwest. So you'll see them spreading even as the rest of America spreads west.